This is Team Harrow, where resilience meets leadership. I'm your host, Ben Harrow, combat veteran, special forces soldier, and entrepreneur. Each week, we dive into powerful stories from high performers who lead, adapt, and overcome. Let's get after it. 3, 2, 1, launch. Alex.
What's up, man?
I'm so glad that you can make it.
Me too.
I know we already started reminiscing a little bit, and I feel like when we get together, we just kind of tell stories of either West Point or when we were at Hood in First Cav together, or SF stories. And we haven't seen each other for a while since you moved down here to Florida. So it has also been a while since I've been back in the studio. So I wanted to get back in and start doing the podcast a little more heavily. And I just thought, what a better way to bring you in for us to reconnect. It's also Cinco de Mayo week, and you being part Mexican, that was another good one too. 7th group as well. I brought the mate.
Yeah.
I told you brought the zins, so we can just do what's former group guys do, and have a mate and put a zin in and bullshit and tell war stories.
Sounds like good.
So thanks for coming in, and let's kind of kick it off with, maybe we should talk about West Point, where we first met.
Absolutely.
And one of my fondest moments is we were friends in Iraq. And I think I had to tell you the truth that, like, yeah, man, when I knew you at West Point, I don't think I really liked you. So that's where I guess our friendship really started, was when we deployed to Iraq together in First Cav. But why don't you pass the zins? And then we can put one in and start chatting.
These are actually Alps.
Oh, the Alps. I'm so sorry.
Tucker Carlson.
Carlson.
Tucker's.
You're sponsored by Tucker.
Well, I did listen to him on the drive up just to prepare, my podcast voice.
I don't think I've ever tried these tropical fruit.
They're not bad. Yeah. I think one of my first memories of you at West Point was I was like getting into it like with some cadet girls, and I was offending them.
Say it ain't so.
Yeah, I was being very misogynistic and offensive, and somebody was like, "That's Ben Harrow's girlfriend." And I'm like, "No."
Oh, that girl Diane.
Yeah. And I knew who you were because of Chris and Jake and like the guys on the LAX team. I was like, well, I don't want to piss him off.
Yeah, I just knew you through Chris because you were Chris's room. Did you room with Chris the entire time at school?
Most of the time, yeah.
Yeah. And you're a rugby guy. So I just knew you as like, yeah, he's like this really jacked dude, but he's on the rugby team, so he's pretty obnoxious like the rest of them. But they're cool guys. They can come hang out at the lacrosse tailgate. It's like two tribes that can kind of still hang out and work together.
And I was close to Vic.
Oh, Demuth, yeah.
I was close to Vic. But yeah, we really got to know each other better when we first got to, I guess, third Brigade, First Cav.
Yeah.
And then that whole deployment. But what do you remember most about West Point?
I enjoyed West Point.
Did you?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
I truly enjoyed going to West Point. But I tell people, because I was an athlete and on a varsity team, it's like being in a fraternity. So you're always with your boys. I also came from an all boys boarding school, so it wasn't that much of a culture shock having to wear a uniform. Showing up on time, the discipline aspect of it. Going to school with girls was like a plus, even though you're at a military academy, right?
It's always a plus.
Showering in a group setting with a bunch of other dudes as a freshman in college wasn't like throwing me off, since I've been showering with other guys like all of high school, right?
Yeah.
And just like all those little like isms and like the culture piece didn't really throw me off. Like I said, I enjoyed it. It was like a fraternity being on the lacrosse team. You hung out with them on the weekends. There were times that were tough, but I overall enjoyed it. Yeah. Do you looking back, would you have changed your route? Now, I'm sure there were some things leading up to this day today, like this career decision wise, that I would imagine that you'd say, I'd be curious would you still go down the same route, West Point, engineer corps, special forces, all the other like kind of major life decisions, I'm sure looking back that maybe there are some things that you would change from a professional military aspect. The personal stuff you could talk about too, but that's up to you.
I don't know. Like I grew up and I watched all the same movies you probably did with like Arnold Schwarzenegger and like
Commando,
yeah,
Predator.
Yeah, exactly. And it was Top Gun, all these very patriotic, like pro-military, like the hero lives and saves the girl and they save the world, and so I had a very like romantic notion about like the military and service and like this very idealistic patriotic view. And so in that sense, like, I don't think that I regret going to West Point. I just kind of like what we're talking about your son earlier, kind of stepping him up in sports, so he could push himself and rise to the occasion. I think for me, West Point was the first time I really had to like try academically. And so I went through high school and, I did homework and this and that, but like I was in bed at 10 and I woke up, I had a very, very, very privileged life, and then I got to West Point and it was hard. And it's like you and everybody else were like really good athletes, super smart. Like it was very competitive to get in, and it was really competitive to stay. And, I don't think that the Thayer method is really like celebrating the journey of learning. It's kind of like just cramming as much information in and then repeating it.
Yeah.
And I remember, being really stressed all the time because I had this expectation of like, well, I made A's in high school, so I need to make A's here. And then, by my senior year, it was kind of like, okay, I'm just gonna not fail, right?
Yeah.
Try to stay like right in the middle of the pack, so my future opportunities are I can have some spectrum of like choice in where I want to post and what I want to branch. But it was hard, and it was the first time I really had to work. And I just remember being tired, and it's like, do I do my engineering problem set or do I read my 20 chapters of military art? And then it's like, well, I want to bet on my engineering problem set. Then next day, clear and stagger. It's like, I should have read my mill art.
I've chosen poorly.
Yeah. But I do have some good memories, like kind of the same reasons. Like I have good memories of like playing in rugby games or just like waking up early to, run stadiums with the rugby team. And like, it's a bunch of guys doing hard things together. And it's like everybody else sleeping, but we're up at 5 running through this slush in the snow. So like the shared, camaraderie,
the shared misery, right?
The shared misery.
And that's something that I feel like personally, I mean, that's one of the things I enjoyed, as like satanistic as it sounds, right? I love the shared misery pieces of like being in the military, like Ranger School, Sapper School, when we were going through the Q course together. There's just something that brings you closer to people and creates that like that family bond of like, we're more than friends. I get it. We're not, we're not brothers, but like we're pretty close because we have this like shared misery. And one of my fondest moments at school was the lacrosse team had to come back early from spring break, maybe it was
That's
Christmas.
right. I think you guys always had to come back. You had like a 4-day weekend for spring break instead.
Exactly. And so I never experienced like college spring break, like
Cancun.
We went to Vegas one time for like a long weekend, which was cool, but it was also like, your typical West Point group. So it was like 8 dudes crammed in a hotel room. And so like, you're just like drinking, it's not like anything crazy. Like people are like, no one's like hooking up with girls. We're all like so odd, so over the top of like, we're just boys, just like dudes only, right?
These dudes having a good time.
Yeah.
You're not going to Cirque du Soleil or you're like seeing a show.
I think a couple of the kids ended up at the Peppermint Rhino, a Spearmint Rhino or something like that. I
never heard of it.
Yeah. But yeah, just like that shared, sharing the suck. That's that was one of my favorite parts of West Point in the military.
I think, what it was the first time that I really was like struggling. And I didn't struggle, but I could have done better, but like, it was hard. It was a lot of work. And I think it was the first time I ever was like vulnerable enough to ask like one of my buddies for help. Like, hey, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? And it being okay, like me not thinking less of myself. Like I didn't have all the answers. I had to, rely on my friends who were like a little smarter in thermodynamics or chemistry or whatever to kind of like help me and work as a team. And I don't know if that was engineered as part of the curriculum, but it's definitely something that served us later on in life, really, especially myself, coming from, where I came up and like my idea of my sense of self and getting straight A's and, maxing the SAT or whatever, to kind of like being stuck and like, I don't know how to do this. And like being vulnerable and having to like humble myself and ask for help from another student. I like that part. I mean, I think that has served me. And I think also kind of it was part of the evolution of kind of like my moral code or my moral compass, because growing up, your mom and dad says, don't lie because it's a sin. And then, West Point's like, don't lie because you'll get kicked out and embarrassed. And so it goes from, kind of this spiritual thing to a kind of more institutionalized, like codified, code of conduct. Yeah. Not that, we didn't kind of cut corners, but it was like the building block, I think. And, I think that and you can talk on it too, but like, I think that for both of us, we're 22, we're in charge of platoon, we're in Iraq, and we have all these soldiers looking up to us in these morally ambiguous situations. And then especially later on, and as a detachment commander, at the end of the day, like you're kind of like that team, that unit, that formation's moral compass. Yeah. And so I think having that instilled, kind of the evolution of, your kind of morals coming from your parents and it's coming from the church. And then it's like institutionalizing this thing that has to function. Everybody has to, not lie, cheat, or steal for this institution to function, to kind of going out in the military. It's like this unit has to have a leadership that has this moral code in order to not have like My Lai happen. Right?
Yeah. Well, I know, and you could talk about it too, but fast forward, we leave West Point, we deploy to Iraq for what we thought was 12 months. Turns out to be the long run of 15 months, right? The extended stay. And I definitely had a lot of ambiguous like situations where you have to, all right, what do I do here? But if you can fall back on like that moral base, like you're talking about, you usually come out doing the right thing. And I'll tell you one. I think I all my stories from Iraq, but
Money Mike.
Well, Money Mike was one. He was there. But at one of our operations where, remember, we used to get like dropped off from do like a offset, right? Infill, yeah. Right? Offset infill, where we get dropped off on like MSR Tampa, and then we kind of walk through the farmland into was it the Golden Hills? Was that the name of it? Remember south of Balad, there was like that Golden Hills area? Anyway.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And it's like, 2:00 in the morning, where this platoon of infantrymen are walking to a couple of homes to go, knock and see if anyone's home. And I remember we came up on a military age male, like in the field. And I was like, what the, who, this wasn't, is this a scout? Is this what, and like, he's like, no, I'm farming. Right. And we're like right there. And like, I kid you not. I mean, we didn't do it, but your first thought is like, all right, do we detain him and bring him with us? I mean, do we just slit his throat and leave him here? Like all options are on the table because you're in this combat scenario and you're playing this through your mind. And, I thought, all right, but I can't just kill, like,
right.
He has no weapon on him, erase that one. That's no good. And so we detained him and brought him with us. Yeah. And then it turned out that he was just farming, so thank God we didn't do that. That would have been a lot of paperwork. And but yeah, like as long as you can fall back on like your morals of like, all right, what do I know what's right, right? And I felt like we had to grow up pretty fast, just being 21, 22, running and gunning in Iraq. Like,
I mean, it was a bunch of babies pretending to play Army. Yeah. I mean, like we were in our early 20s, 22, right? We just graduated from West Point, and the median age of our soldier was like 20. We might have had a few E7s that were the old guys that were late 20s.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, half my platoon I felt was like either Puerto Rican or Mexican. There was a couple of kids that I felt like didn't want to go to jail, so they joined the Army, right? So it's like you have a real healthy mix. Of course, there's some Pacific Islanders in there too. It's a unique bunch that you're forced to lead, like not forced, but you have the responsibility to lead and bring home.
That's what I loved about the Army, actually. Growing up in Austin, Texas, there wasn't a lot of diversity, and especially going to a Catholic school, it's like your Irish, Italian descent, white people, and then like your Latino Mexicans, and that's pretty much it. And so like West Point was first time, there was every flavor of, humanity in there. And I didn't really feel like West Point was that, the friends groups were that segregated along lines, and then in the Army, definitely. I remember being on staff duty one night and, watching all the guys leave the barracks, and 3 of my soldiers left, and one was wearing boat shoes and like a polo with his khakis. One was wearing, cowboy boots with a pearl snap, and then another person was wearing like a jersey and Jordans. They were 3 best friends, and they would have never met and been best friends except for the Army. And they probably never met anyone like that other person growing up, but in the Army, they're best friends. Yeah. I thought that was really cool. But yeah, going back to
scenario wise in Iraq.
Well, I mean, I definitely get that, because I think, and we can talk about this later, I want to talk about this later, was like the fear of something really bad happening and not to myself, but to one of my guys. And then it being a decision that I made that caused that person to get harmed. So you get super protective. So if the mission is to go conduct like a raid to kill or capture these high value targets, and you see a guy in the field, it's 2 a.m. and he's farming, it's like, am I going to take that risk? No, I'm not going to take that risk. So that's why, people listening might not understand, like, that's a little extreme, Ben. It's like, no,
you weren't there.
It's either, I'm putting these guys at risk. I'm assuming a risk by not doing something that he doesn't compromise us. Right. So, well, I don't know how this plays into like maintaining my moral compass, but I do remember one time, Money Mike. Do you want to give the context of who Money Mike is, or should I?
Go ahead.
So Money Mike was, he was a Shia Iraqi who was put in charge of the Scorpion Platoon, which was this Iraqi National Police SWAT team. Mm-hmm. And they essentially were, it was a surge. It was 2006, 2007.
Yeah. A lot of Shia versus Sunni.
There's a lot of sectarian violence going on. There was a lot of militias forming, and some of these militias had uniforms and were sanctioned by the U.S., and some of these militias were being funded by Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups and other foreign interests, right? And it was just this big turf war between gangs and like getting back and getting even, and Saddam's out and the Americans are here and the Americans are with me. And it was, looking back on it, it was kind of like a Shia death squad that was just doing retribution for all the wrongs done against them and their tribe. He had his cousins and his brothers and his uncles and his family. It was his tribe that was the Scorpion Platoon, and he was in charge of it, and he was a character. And he didn't really have a moral compass at all. So I remember going on Objective, and we found this guy, and he was definitely had something to do with moving money from somewhere else, from Syria or somewhere. He was moving money, and he was giving money to, because it was a war-torn country. It was hard to get work, right? So these poor Iraqis that didn't have the means to leave the country were stuck there, and they're at the mercy of these gangs, and they're at the mercy of the U.S. troops, and they didn't really have any way of like buying food for their family. So if an Al-Qaeda guy or a terrorist comes and says, "Hey, I want you to blow up the Americans. Here's $400. Film it, send it to me." I mean, that's a pretty lucrative deal.
It's how they put food on the table.
So that was kind of what we're combating, right? And so if we cut off the financing, we'd kind of relieve the downstream effects of that financing. So I knew this guy was bad. We didn't have enough to hold him. Long story short, we didn't have enough to hold him, but I knew Money Mike would like to get a chance to interview him, let's say. So I found him. I took him to Money Mike. Money Mike does this whole production, and Money Mike he wore like mesh tank tops.
Yeah, I remember that.
He wore mesh tank tops. He had some gold chains. He had like the American ball cap. He had like the Oakleys.
Yeah.
He always smelled like whiskey and
constantly smoking Marlboro Reds. Yeah.
And he had like $200 like Oslo hiking boots and some like blue and some like blue camo National Police, right? Blue cargo pants. He was a character, and he had his little crew come out, and he had these big souped up Ford F-250 pickup trucks that he went around in. And so he met me at this traffic circle, and he's pulled up in this traffic circle, and when we're at this traffic circle, there is some Iraqi beat cops there, and he was like, "Emshi," and they went away and he kind of secured the area and he walked out and he's like, Malazam, what do you have for me? Oh, I know this guy. I will talk to him. And throws him in the back of the pickup truck. And I'm like, all right, well, Iraqi solution to Iraqi problem. And so it was a couple, probably like 2 weeks later, and he was on our fob and he was like, Malazam, I've been looking all over for you. And I'm like, oh, what's going on? He's like, that guy you gave me. I was like, yeah. He's like, I took the batteries, I put it here, I put it here. I was like, no, I don't want to hear what you did.
Yeah, that didn't happen, Mike. That didn't happen.
But yeah, there was a lot of stuff that there's a lot of situations we were in that were really hard to navigate, especially when you had a lot of like really amped up young men that were angry, that were bored, that were, we just took a casualty yesterday, so we're going to go in this village and I'm going to let my rage out. And you had to kind of pull the reins back and direct that energy into something positive, right? I don't think there's any other 22-year-olds doing that at the time, unless you were.
Which is amazing, like now that we're in our 40s and looking back on like what kids in their young 20s are doing, and to think like, man, when I was your age, I was like running and gunning on MSR Tampa and like gunning down IED emplacers. Like it's just a different planet. Like it blows my mind sometimes, like to think about that, like the maturity level and like how quick you grow up.
So I can talk about this later, but I mentor like young men. And before I left Austin, I was working with these kids that were in kind of like a court-ordered rehab, and they were later high school, like early, like hadn't started college yet, like 16 to 20, and they're like, hey, Alex, like how do you go and talk to a girl in real life? I'm like, what do you mean? It's like if you see a girl out and you want to go talk to her that you think she's pretty, like how would you do that? Go about doing that? And I'm like, what do you, like, you've never done that? He's like, no, I always just do it on
your phone. God damn.
Like, I get anxiety when I have to go talk to a girl. I'm like, yeah, I got anxiety too when I was leading 40 soldiers on Route Tampa that was black. It was like, do not travel. But it's like, well, we got to go out in your AO, There is like, yeah, I'm definitely grateful for the opportunity, and that we did have to grow up fast, and that we did, I think, they gave us this responsibility, and we didn't waste any time kind of growing up and learning and doing. I feel like things that mattered. Yeah. Even we can debate like the merits of the invasion of Iraq, but the point is like the U.S. was going to send somebody, and we answered that call, and we went and we did the best we could to keep our guys safe and affect positive change in Iraq somehow. If it was keeping like the gangsters off the population, or keeping everything at bay, or just kind of being there so nothing bad happens.
No, absolutely. Like I feel that way about Iraq. I feel that way about Afghanistan. I was sent there, and I know that while I was there, I made some sort of impact, right? Like I just know I left it better than when I got there. And like you said, we can have a long discussion about the strategic impact of going to Iraq and Afghanistan and the pullout and everything else and where we're at now. But and I think you can kind of really get yourself down like a depressing hole to think like, oh my God, everything nothing mattered, right? But that's not true, because to somebody over there, like you did something that didn't matter, like.
Well, just think about how long we were over there. There is
two Thanksgivings. I remember spending 2 Thanksgivings in Iraq.
Well, both how long we were there as individuals, or our unit was there, but how long the U.S. military was in Iraq and Afghanistan. And if we were able to keep, the extremists at bay long enough for like some kids to have a normal childhood, we were there for 20 years. Some kids were able to grow up. Women, some women were able to go to school before everything descended into chaos. Then that was worth it, I think.
Look, I say it all the time too, like you can't measure success in Iraq or Afghanistan with like the American lens. And I think that's something that I really learned. That's something I learned like week 1 in Iraq, which is, I've said this story before, where, remember my Terp Clay? And he's like, hey, sir, he's like, you're the boss. Whatever you say goes. I'm just going to like give you a tip and hint here. And that's it. And he said, you're way too nice to these people. he's like, I get it. You have a big heart. You want to come in here and help, but they don't respect kindness. They think of it. They see kindness as weakness, and that's just a Middle Eastern Arab world view. And he's like, I hear them. He's like, I hear what they're saying. They think that you're soft and it's a target, and they're going to take advantage of you. He's like, you need to be firm. And he's like, that's how Saddam, came to power in the first place, and that's something that they respect. And it like really opened my eyes, and I realized, you have to have some sort of like situational awareness. And all right, however this culture measures success is probably how we need to measure success, and not really from like the American standpoint of like, all right, they have power, they have schools, a police department, a library, right? Like, it's amazing.
They have a women's center.
Yeah, a women's center. Is the women's center still there today? Probably not. I hope it is. Miss Menor was amazing, and God bless her. But yeah, it's just, I know at our ground level, like, we made some sort of impact. That's just the reality of it, right? So after Iraq, we end up going through the Q course together. In fact, I remember we both went to do our physicals.
I just told Marina the story about my SF physical.
Go ahead.
Well, you came and knocked on my trailer door.
Yeah.
And I was like, what are you doing on my fob? And you're like, oh, I'm here to get my physical. Have you done your physical yet? I'm like, yeah, I'm probably going to get around to doing that. You're like, well, you're not going to have enough time once we redeploy you, but I got to take care of it today. And I'm like, and that's how I decided to go SF. Because I was like, well, there's nothing else to do before chow, so I guess I'll go get my SF physical. And then you had an appointment with the doctor.
Yeah.
And then I got seen by this female PA.
Yeah.
Who insisted on doing a digital rectal exam.
Yeah, I didn't get a digital
rectal but she
exam.
was like going through the
checklist.
Yeah, in the actual manual.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, it says right here, digital rectal exam. I can't. The paperwork needs it. And I was kind of embarrassed to like have, as another captain, she was attractive, and I was kind of embarrassed. I was like,
you were embarrassed for her to insert herself into you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I kind of wasn't into that.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to. So she's like, well, I can do it, or I can have the specialist out in the hall do it. And I thought, well, I'll just like have the specialist out. And I was like, yeah, she's like, if you're more comfortable with a male, that's fine. I'm like, okay. But it didn't end up being any better. Because she stayed in the room, and he comes in, he's like 6'6", and he has hands out to like here. And I'm like, oh man, I'm
like a Seir school instructor.
I immediately regret this decision. And I'm kind of doggy style on the bench, and it's not like she leaves the room and does it. He doesn't know what he's doing, so she's there directing him. She's like, okay, you can insert it up now. And I'm just like, I'm so embarrassed.
Oh my god.
I'm so embarrassed. But
in the room next door with me, the guy was like, how's your prostate? I'm like, fine. He's like, check.
Yeah, I should have made an appointment with that guy. But no, then we redeployed, and then we started training up to go to selection, and we redeployed like January, and
January.
We went to selection in June.
Yeah, it was June or July. It was one of those summer classes that they started up again because they weren't doing summer classes, but because the GWAT I think was thumping, and they were trying to pump out as many Green Berets as possible. They moved it from, what was it, like 27, 29 days to 14 days, and during
2 weeks
summer,
in hell.
Yep. There was that Discovery documentary. Have you found it on YouTube? It's on YouTube.
I think I watched it, and I remember one of the
the instructors on there are instructors.
Yeah.
I think it's like a September or fall class. I don't remember. It must have been. I don't remember if it was before us or after us, but some of those kids I remember seeing in the Q course, like maybe a class before or a class ahead of us. But the instructor, what was his name? Uncle Jesse.
Uncle Jesse.
Yeah. The guy that looked like Uncle Jesse from Full House.
Yeah, he had great hair. And I remember you, me, Chris. Who else was at Hood?
I'm not going to do last names because some of them are still in. But,
okay, but we all trained up together.
So yeah, you, me, and Chris came from Hood, and we all trained up together, which is great because
I was in
felt
great
like
shape.
I felt like I was in the best shape to go through selection. It was an ass kicker for sure. I remember we ran into each other during the trek. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I came up to you or you came up to me, but it was like such a blur and so beat up, right? Because it's like the last event you're doing, you don't even know, but it's like somewhere between 25 and 30 miles. You just keep following the cones. and the majority of it is in that like sand. So it's like it sucks to walk, and
Yeah.
it's so heavy, and you're so tired. And I remember seeing you, and we walked for a while for a little bit. I think I gave you some of my Red Hots.
Yeah. No, we started walking, and you're not supposed to talk, right?
Yeah.
And so you're like Ben. It's like, Hoop, is that you? Like, yeah. He's like, oh, this sucks. He's like, you're like, I remember I ran into you. I ran into Chris. I ran into.
Oh, you told me this. Everyone, you thought it was interesting because everyone kind of had a different perspective.
Everybody's personality like came out. Like I ran into Chris, and I'm like, hey man. He's like, dude, I'm not gonna make it. I'm like, yeah, you are. We're almost done. See those lights over there? He's like, no, I'm not gonna make it. We're not gonna make it. No, I don't think any of us are gonna make it. I rolled my ankle. I can't go on. I was like, all right, well, good luck. I just kind of kept walking, and then I ran into George,
yeah.
and I was like, hey, what's up, man? He's like, 1, 2, 3. He was doing a pace count.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's like, sorry, I don't want to mess up my pace count. I'm like, okay. I kept on walking. I ran into you, and you're like, oh, hey, what's up, man? And we're just chilling, and you're like, this sucks. I'm like, yeah, it does suck. He's like, I want to eat. I'm like, yeah, let's eat. So we got out our MREs and we ate.
We ate breakfast real quick. Yeah. I remember that. I think I had an egg omelet. I didn't even heat it up. I ate it cold, sucked it down. And then I just remember thinking, all right, I got to get moving again because the more time I stay here, the more I'm going to feel comfortable. And like, I don't want to get too comfy. And I don't know if we kept going or how we split up again.
We kept going for a while, but I think our pace was just enough to where we like kind of started trailing off.
Yeah.
But we finished right next to each other.
I know. We finished like soon thereafter. I think it was like 8 hours and 30 minutes, 8 hours and 20 minutes. It took us to walk that thing.
I don't even like being awake for 8 hours.
Dude,
continuous. Can you imagine walking for 8 hours?
Besides the thing that I remember most about the trek was, you remember when you got done, they told you to go wait off in formation, like drop your ruck and go wait over here. And my feet hurt so bad just from the constant like pounding of walking
and then we had to walk on those rocks.
Like 9 hours. Yeah. It felt like somebody just took a baseball bat to the bottom of my feet. Like it hurt so effing bad. And then you stand in formation, like you got to like wiggle back and forth because it just hurts so bad, like to stand there. That's like the biggest thing I remember about the trek. But yeah, I mean, selection sucked like it was supposed to, but I felt like we trained up properly for it. And then we both end up at 7th group. Once again, besides getting banged up in Afghanistan, I enjoyed my time in 7th group. It was a lot of life lessons, a lot of camaraderie and brotherhood. I enjoyed both teams that I was on, both deployments to Afghanistan. I never got the opportunity to go down south, which I know you did a couple times.
Yeah. Well, we can't talk about the Q course without the time that you sabotaged my entire existence and stole my Gerber.
So there's a lot of stories that I would love for us to talk about. And once again, we can edit a lot of it out, so we can start to share stories.
Okay. Oh, like you have more than just the Gerber story?
Well, yeah, I have many stories about you that I remember from the Q course, but I think it was probably because you were so like hungry and tired and out of it and whiny that you just don't remember.
Well, the only one I remember is the Gerber when you sabotaged.
Can I tell the Gerber story?
Yeah, as long as you're honest about it. How you hid it from me.
Yeah, Scout's honor. So during selection, we get part of the selection process is the land nav, right? Mm-hmm. So we the STAR course. Everyone knows about the STAR course and how big it is in selection, and it's this big land navigation course, and it's like make or break, right? We go out to the land navigation site, the entire class. We're like a week in, so we've already had kids like drop. You're pretty tired. Mm-hmm. I remember we do like a practice STAR course, and selection is kind of like a gentleman's course, if you will, where there's really not that much yelling, but you just have to follow the instructions. And the instructions were, hey, tonight, because there's weather moving in, we're going to allow you to make little tents with your little poncho tents, buddy up, get a ranger buddy.
So far accurate.
All right.
So far honest.
So you're one of my friends going through the Q course, and it was the selection, and we had other West Point classmates from other units that we hadn't seen in a while at selection. So it was actually like a little reunion. Yeah. It was cool to see everybody. So we buddy up and we put our ponchos together, and we probably cuddle each other at night because it's freezing at night, right? We wake up at a certain time. Some of us realize that we're at a selection event, and I want to get my shit together and get out to the cones because it's an individual event.
Yeah, they said be at the cones at like 08 or whatever.
Yeah, it was like 008, right? So I'm up, I'm packing my ruck, I break down my poncho, throw my boots on, suck down some water, go to the water buffalo, make sure all my canteens are full, my ruck is ready to go. I'm one of the first guys on the cone with my rucksack sitting there ready to go. You, on the other hand, Alex, are like, it's a beautiful day. And I think that you were actually like loud, kind of jokey about it too. Like, who's ready to do some land nav today, right? Just fucking around.
Doesn't sound like me at all.
Yeah. And as you're putting your stuff together, you're like, hey, where's my Gerber? And you're like 50 feet away from me, and the cadre are slowly starting to come in with their like coffee and like waiting for 08 to happen for them to be like game on and let's go. And you're like, hey, my Gerber. Has anyone seen my Gerber? And in my mind, I'm like, I think I told you. I was like, dude, shut up and get your shit together and get over here. And you're like, Ben, I think you must have my Gerber. Did you put your Gerber? I was like, Alex, I have all my shit. Your Gerber is probably in the bottom of your rucksack when we were putting up our poncho tent last night.
It just shoved it.
Let's fucking go. Let's go, man. And you I say this as a friend and a brother, but like a fucking child, you sat there looking for your Gerber, demanding for the world
to help me find my Gerber.
Somebody manifest my Gerber, right?
You guys don't care about my Gerber.
Yeah, exactly.
I just didn't feel supported in that moment, Ben.
So, of course, I told you, listen, dude, it's probably in the bottom of your rucksack. Shut up. Like, I'm over here. You're drawing too much attention to me right now. Like, let's go.
Never wanted to call too much attention to yourself as the gray man.
Yes, I wanted to play gray man, right? And so as the day goes on, I remember we end up that night once again because it was like a little West Point clique.
Yeah, we did the Star course for that day, and then people came back, and then it was eat chow and hang out until
and usually like you eat chow with all your friends, and you're like, oh, like what did you guys? How was your event today? How'd you do that? And I'm there, and I've already told like a gossiping queen,
everybody,
all of our friends,
how I freaked out about my Gerber,
how Alex freaked out about his Gerber, and they all heard it too because everyone I remember was like laughing at you, and
that's what hurt so bad.
Yes, yeah, and so I remember you walk over like very humbly and quiet and like sit down with your meal, and you're like, I don't even say shit because I'm like this fucking guy and his Gerber, and you're like, hey, and I'm like, what's up, dude? And you're like, so
I found my Gerber.
About the Gerber. I go, yeah. You go, I found it. And I go, where was it? And you go, you were right. It was in my rucksack. It was in the bottom of my rucksack.
I don't hold grudges.
Neither do I. Neither do I. So that was the Gerber story.
That was probably my defining moment in the Q course, overcoming the adversity. And no, that was in the Q course. That was selection, right?
That was selection.
Yeah. Q course is all that's a blur. Like West Point, honestly, is a blur. Iraq is a blur.
Yeah.
Q course, I remember it was good training. I thought it was. I had another humbling moment in the actual Q course in SUT. That's kind of funny. Because SUT, small unit tactics, it's basically patrolling in the woods, doing light patrolling. You do it as a squad, then you do it as like a bigger element, and it's kind of like everybody rotates to leadership, and you're getting assessed as a leader or like as a patrol leader, as the assistant patrol leader. And there's a lot of younger kids, there's a lot of like NCOs, and so most of all the officers, they've either been to a light patrolling school, so the cadre's not like really like interested in taking a look at them. They're kind of trying to get other people reps at more of like the actions on the objective. So my cadre comes to me and he's like, hey, sir. I'm like, what's up? He's like, I got a really simple mission for you tonight. I'm like, what's that? He's like, move this gaggle 12 clicks like to the northwest, and then just get in an ORP, and that's it. If you can do it, you get your goal, and I won't talk to you the rest of the exercise. He's like, you think you can handle that? I'm like, oh yeah, I can handle that. And so we had to walk there was a draw. So there's like a ridge line here and there's a draw. And we just had to walk kind of north and then west and then get into the objective rally point and kind of bed down for the night. And that was it. I would have been a go at SUT.
Would have been.
But when you're walking like along a hill, you tend to kind of slide down the hill naturally. So
get stuck in the draw.
And so I was just kind of like, you know, I got kind of like my point guy, and I got my team together. I'm like, here's the mission. Here's where we have to go, take off. And so we're walking. And I actually somehow get on the south side of the draw that I need to be on the north side of. And I'm like, this is not right. Like, I'm looking on the map, I'm like, realize where I'm at. I'm like, oh shit, there's in those draws in North Carolina, it's just, there's no way to penetrate them. It's just thick stuff. And so I remember I was like, okay, everybody just like take a security halt here. I'm gonna like take this guy. We're gonna go try to like find a way through and then get on the other side, and then we'll bring everybody back. And visibility is like really bad, and you can't see like this close in front of you. And so we end up a movement that should have probably taken like 2 hours at max. I think we're rolling into the ORP at like 5 a.m, and we should have been there, you know, like it was like midnight when we got done with actions on our last one. We huddled up when we moved to the next objective rally point. So we should have had, you know, at least 4 hours to like sleep and eat and chill out. And it was like 4 o'clock when we're rolling in. We're finally set up, and I just remember the cadre coming over. He's like, didn't see that one coming. You're definitely gonna be getting another patrol. I was like, yeah, roger that. Because I'm like there in the thick, like just with my rifle trying to make a hole, and then the cadre was yelling, he's like, PL, where are you?
Yeah.
And I'm just like,
it's the worst sound. Yeah, I enjoyed the Q course. I liked what we did during the officer portion, where it was just all the captains.
That was interesting. That was fun.
That was fun.
We went to the little house.
Yeah. Everything was like in civvies, and a lot more like the clandestine stuff of the SF world.
The advanced special operation techniques, the more human intel gathering stuff was fun.
That was cool.
I don't know, man. I think the culmination, like Robin Sage and the POW or the Seir stuff, that was great training.
Seir, I say it all the time. Seir was the best. Seir was the best military school I've ever been to. Like what you learn there, what you learn about yourself, like going through the laboratory, right? And then also, I never thought I would see Americans doing that stuff to other Americans, but I understand it all now, right? Like taking a step back, you're like, holy shit. But yeah, like there's some wild stuff at Seir. Like I remember that Russian kid that we went through the Q course with. He was like in your field group or
Vlad.
team. Yeah, Vlad. Must have been like the second day in the camp or third. Like we were very sleep deprived. Like I don't remember sleeping at all.
Like, we didn't for like
3
a
days.
Week. Yeah.
For 3 straight days, I don't remember sleeping at all. So like you're super sleep deprived, and it must have been like 2-3 in the morning. I'm droning. They probably have us like making us like pick up rocks or like grass, like just stupid
make designs in the
like stupid stuff like
the
that.
The wood chips.
And for whatever reason, obviously Vlad has the Russian accent. They made him stand at the front gate and sing the Russian national anthem for like 30 minutes. And I was like, I am tripping out right now. Like, because this dude is going off singing the Russian national anthem. These guards over here are like beating us. These guys are over here naked. It's just like crazy shit going on.
I remember I came back from an interview.
Yeah.
And they hood you up. They take you to your interview. You do your interview, and then they take you back, and then they unhood you, and they put you back in the yard. And I remember coming in on the yard, and Will, who is mixed descent, he's standing there, and he's screaming at the top of his lungs, I'm not white. I'm not black. I don't know what I am. I'm not white. I'm not black. I don't know what I am. And then another African-American guy was like with a banana pretending to be a monkey. And then there's literally a naked football game going on.
Yeah.
And like guys were like pretending to play football. And then, I think people were screaming, in foreign languages at the top of their lungs. It was like so surreal. And then there's like baby crying over the loudspeakers.
Oh, I remember that.
And I think the point point of all that was to learn, like, don't do that. If
Yeah.
they ask you to do something embarrassing, don't
Yeah.
do it. Like, I think that we had that was the feedback for our class, right?
Yeah.
We didn't have enough passive resistance. We had too much like
Aggressive,
overt resistance.
Yeah.
Like when they took the fire hose at us, and we were like, well,
Yeah. They're like, you guys are all dead.
Yeah.
They're like, this is like the
yeah. They
learning
pulled
lesson.
out their ID cards
Yeah.
like admin break.
Admin. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a learning lesson. You guys are all dead. Like, think about that. And we're like, oh, wait a second.
But we died for our country.
Remember that that one cell where they put all of us in?
Yes, the little room.
Yeah, while basically they're doing like cadre change out, whatever. And I remember we all started singing this like the Star Spangled Banner, and they beat us, and like the lesson is like if you're getting beat, it's like to move, like to let you know, like hint, 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 you're doing something wrong. And they pulled people out, and they'd have a conversation with them, and then they throw them back in, and they come in and grab a couple more kids, and we're still singing. And then finally I remember they play over the loudspeaker machine gun sound, and they're like, that is the sound of all of you being executed because you're not paying attention to what we're telling you, right? And that's like, that was a big learning lesson of like, oh, wait a second, like you gotta be thinking like all the time.
Yes, you have to be thinking. You can't react. You have to like think of ways to slightly like undermine them.
Yeah, like play the game,
but not just puff your chest out and say, hit me harder. I don't care, because the point is you'll die. Right? Yeah, that was good training.
I felt during my interviews, I went through 3 of them, and I remember the first one I was like, oh, I did so well in that. And then the last one, which really was a mind fuck because they were mentioning my wife's name and our address and everything, and also probably because I was sleep deprived and so beat up anyway, that it was probably pretty trippy as well. But that one I thought went horribly wrong.
And you did well.
And afterwards they do the outbrief with you, and they're like, all right, this interview you did well. This was the approach, and you did this, and you did this. Actually, it was the exact opposite, where my first interview was like shit, and then my last one, they're like, you did great.
You stayed inside the circle.
And I remember after my last interview, walking back into the gate, I'm like, I think I just gave everybody up. Like, I think I just really screwed up.
Yeah.
But I remember we did very good as a class of like, all right, when people would come back in from their interviews towards the end, we'd be like, all right, like come hang out over here in this huddle. And like we were
debriefing each other and like giving each other support.
Trying to figure, like starting to play the game. So many good stories. But I want to also talk about, because I mean the Army was only such a small but like major piece of our lives, transition.
Yes.
And how transition went down for you, kind of what it looked like, and lessons learned.
Well, so yeah, I think that I did my team leader time. I had some really good missions. I know my team got to do this Title 50 mission down in South America, working with other government agencies, doing cool stuff that I thought was like the real Green Beret mission. And for me, it was I was just thinking, like, where do you go after this? I don't want to be a major on staff just to wait to be an AOB commander, and then kind of move up that pyramid, because there's 6 team leaders, there's 1 AOB commander, and then it gets and
it's really just like a desk job afterwards.
I mean, you could volunteer for a special mission unit. But you risk like not getting picked up for that. You could go FAO maybe. I don't know. I think it got harder for the younger year group, for the year groups after us to go FAO. But there weren't a lot of options. Like your career path in the military was very cut and dry. It's like you do this job, you get rated, you do this next job. And I think for me that's something I took for granted, or it was comforting that I knew that, after West Point, I was going to be a lieutenant, and then this was a career progression, and you could go to SF or you could go to Rangers, and then you could do this. And this is kind of like everything was. Not
to interrupt, but the other thing too is, especially coming out of West Point, you can look to your left and right and kind of be like, all right, what are my classmates doing? Because if, I always felt too, like, I don't exactly know what to do, but my classmates are doing this path also. So maybe I'll do that as well.
And that might serve you in the military, but I don't think it's exactly like a one size fits all. Like, you go to business school, and then you go to like investment banking or, whatever, consulting, and then you do. I mean, I think there's a lot of guys who did that, and a lot of guys did really well, But just because you have the ability to do it, and just because you have the GI Bill and the opportunity to do it, and that other people with similar background have experienced success, doesn't necessarily mean that's what you should do.
Yeah.
And I think that's a mistake where a lot of, transitioning veterans put themselves in. I know I did. I kind of saw like, this is the path that vets have done, and maybe I'll do this. And it didn't really work for me. I mean, essentially, I didn't really have a plan. I just knew that I didn't want to be in the military anymore. And I wanted to go back home, and I wanted to be with my family. I wanted to be part of the community. I wanted to see the same people. And I felt like when I was in group, I was always coming and going. There's no really
stability.
There was no sense of like I had any roots in the community. I was always like an outsider. Go to the CrossFit gym, and it's like they're all kind of from
You're a nomad. You're basically like a nomad.
They're all from the area. They all have roots in the area. They're like other small business owners that, go and then you're like the army guys that go to the CrossFit gym, right? And I just want to be part of the community, I guess. And I wanted to be back home. And so I didn't have a plan. My plan was to go to one of these SAC conferences and like throw out my resume, and everybody be like, "Oh my God, you're a Green Beret? You can have my job." Jesus Christ, it's Jason Bourne. I had a very skewed sense of kind of reality. Maybe I was a little bit entitled too. But the reality is that there's tons of veterans, there's tons of former detachment commanders, there's tons of Green Berets that are transitioning all the time, and there's tons of veterans getting out of the workforce. And for me, I think that the sad reality that I woke up to was that a lot of employers, like, they think, "Oh, okay, Green Beret, that's cool," or Army guy, military guy, that's cool. And then you go to the interview, and they're like, my aunt's cousin's sister, she worked with a girl that was in the Army. Her name's Amy. Did you know her? And
Amy doesn't ring a bell,
right? Do you get that? Like,
yeah.
and it's a big organization, so they don't know. Like they know that Green Berets are cool, but they don't really hold them in the same esteem that maybe like a 18-year-old private in the 82nd holds like a Green Beret in, right? There's not that hierarchy or the pecking order. You don't wear all your stuff on your flare on your chest, and the only thing that really matters is like what you can do for that company. Like how can they use you to make money? And it doesn't matter kind of what you did. It's kind of what you're going to do for them. Yeah. And being able to communicate that and really have enough sense of yourself to understand yourself well enough to say, okay, what am I good at? What do I like? And what do I kind of want to do? And how can I leverage all that to make this company money? So I think the transition for me was less of a plan and more of kind of like a hit or miss. I went to the SAC, I got this job. It was a good job. It was a consulting job. I had really good mentors, but there was kind of I sensed that there was like a barrier to I guess various like upward mobility based off my knowledge of software or an MBA. And it was kind of like you either have to like take computer science class or get your MBA. And so I tried taking a computer science class, and that didn't work out that well. Well, I was consulting, right? So I was getting on a plane Monday morning, and I was getting home, Thursday night or Friday morning, and I had 48 hours on the weekend to hang out with my folks, go on a date, hang out with my buddies, do all my laundry, check my mail, and do my computer science classes. And I didn't have the bandwidth for that, especially after everything I did in the military. Like I felt entitled. Like, why do I have to try? Like I went through Seir school.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want.
Do you know I have a sapper tab?
Yeah. So, and then I got a opportunity through that job, I was actually traveling all the time, and I was submitting my expense reports, and my boss was like, "Hey, why are you taking taxis?" And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know if I'm not supposed to take taxis." He's like, No. You can take a taxi if you want, but have you heard of this thing called Uber? Like, it's sweet. You just press a button and a black car shows up for you. And so my next trip, I tried out Uber, and I was like, this is so cool. And it just so happens that they were launching Uber in Austin, and I knew some guys through the West Point network that were like in Seattle and Washington, and I wrote them, and I was like, I want to work for Uber. And so I got an interview, and I was able to launch Uber and Uber Eats in Austin and like Central Texas, and we had some markets in Oklahoma too. And that was a lot of fun. That job was so much fun, but still not a career. It was kind of like, and a lot of, I felt like there was maybe not necessarily like an age gap, but I have all this life experience starting at 22, and these kids that I was working with, when I got out, I was like 32, right? Out of the military at 10,
about that.
And so maybe a little bit younger, maybe like 30, right? Cause I did 10 years. So yeah, 32. And these kids were like mid to late 20s, so not like little kids, but still like just lacked like this life experience, and everyone's freaking out about, can this guy get an Uber? And I'm like, we're not curing cancer, guys. We're giving rides to drunks, and we're like, driving around with a cooler full of burritos in the back of a truck. That's how we actually did Uber Eats at first, before we got the whole supply chain mapped out. We actually got the restaurants onboarded on the app, and so you could do all this stuff through the app, but the point of sale kind of wasn't as refined as it was today, where you make the order, and then when the order's ready, the courier comes and picks it up. It's kind of like we just got all these entrees and put it in the back of an Uber driver's car.
Like, hey man, we now need you to make deliveries.
And so we put all we got you're going to be an Uber Eats driver today, and you have like burritos in here, and you have like sandwiches, and you have like sushi. And we just drove around for like 4 hours during lunchtime. But we iterated on that process, but that's how it started. But like, I'm like, dude, we're giving rides to drunks. We're not curing cancer. It's not that strict. No one's shooting at you. No one's going to be in a body bag today. Just calm down. Yeah. And I think that actually was a little bit to my disservice, right? Because I had so much life experience that I mean, I couldn't possibly derive the kind of purpose, doing operations for Uber in Austin that I did from like leading guys in combat, in the jungle in South America, versus like, okay, what's your plan for ACL this year? And it's like, we'll have some cars, and so
we'll move drunk from point A to point B.
And I think that might have, so I think and I'm still trying to figure it out, and maybe it's not something that you get from your 9-to-5 job, right? But you have to find, I would say, I wish that I took a lot more time in my transition to go to school. So I ended up going to, after the Uber thing, I met a lot of these like really smart guys from like Wharton and all the big,
HBS,
Ivy League business schools who were like really badass that I respected. And I thought, okay, maybe so I went to UT, I got my MBA, and then, but I wish that, cause you have the rest of your life to kind of figure out your career. And, if you don't necessarily feel that compelled or that called to go to these cookie cutter, like go to this business school, go to iBanking, or go to consulting, if you figure out what you really like. Maybe it's writing screenplays, maybe it's painting, maybe it's teaching, maybe it's something that you wouldn't have thought of because it's not necessarily something that's like super high on the, like where you're gonna make 6 figures and then you're gonna make this much and this. It's not using the same metrics to judge things, right?
Yeah.
You're on this like achievement, especially guys go from West Point to like Green Beret, special ops, like you're on this like achievement metric, and it's like this ego thing where it's like, well, I'm better than that guy, my team, and when I think when you transition, it's very personal, and you got to find, we went out after work, we rucked 2 or 3 hours at night, a couple hours in the morning. On the weekends, we did a 12-miler just to prepare. We had that drive and that sense of I got to do this. And it wasn't work. It was like something that we were doing so that we could excel in some sort of test to go get a piece of headgear.
Yeah.
But we had that drive and that passion to go do it because we believed in what we were doing. And that's been very hard for me to find in like a civilian career. So I think that, if I had one piece of advice to give to any veterans that are transitioning, or anybody's like, whether they're did 4 years, or they did a career, whether they're special ops, whether they're a mechanic, find the world really is your oyster, and you should be very deliberate about figuring out what it is that you like to do, where the crossroads of like your ability and your interest, and like where they intersect in order to like be of service to other people. And that's where I think you'll thrive. And I think if you wake up every day thinking like how I can be of service to other people, if you spent years of your formidable years in life serving, you kind of have that warrior heart, that servant's heart, that'll really kind of help you get through that transition. And it's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
It's not going to be walking to the SAC, passing out your resume, and then figuring out, which
I'm here for the purpose-driven job that you're just going to hand me.
And a lot of times I think you have to find that, it might just be that your job is where your talents lie and where they'll give you money for. And then that purpose you derive in your family or your community or your church, or, helping other vets, or helping homeless vets, or helping kids with addiction, or helping tutor kids. You can find that purpose other ways. Very few people, I think, are really lucky enough to be super fulfilled in their work and derive such a sense of purpose from it that it totally fulfills them.
Yeah.
And I think if you're looking for your work to fill that purpose for you, ultimate, or your partner or something, you're going to ultimately be dissatisfied and end up being resentful.
Yeah.
Resentful for your boss doesn't appreciate you. Resentful that like it could have been a better job, or resentful of your partner because she's not fulfilling all your needs. It's like, no, it's like everything it works in concert to kind of build your life for your purpose.
Did you feel resentment? Did you find yourself in that way of where you were struggling to find purpose in your day-to-day that you became resentful?
Ooh. Well, I think that, so let's talk about resentment really quick. I think that, so, I moved on from Uber. I got my MBA, and I finally got this this dream kind of job working for a private equity company, Vista Equity Partners, and it was actually Marissa Limshako that hooked me up with one of her tennis partners that was an operating partner, and so she got me a look, and I got hired for a job probably wasn't qualified to do. But I felt like I'd really succeeded. I'd leveraged my MBA to get this perfect job, and I was working in the Frost Bank building downtown Austin. I had like this high-rise apartment just down the street. I was wearing like suits to work every day, working in this beautiful office, doing what I thought was really cool stuff, and yet and so I had all the trappings, all the material trappings of success. I would end up meeting this beautiful girl. It was my girlfriend. And I was making some friends, around town. And I thought that I really made it. And I little did I know then that I was completely spiritually broken, just completely spiritually, like a complete wreck of a human. Still keeping it together, still. On the outside, still like posting stuff to Instagram to make myself look cool or my life look great. But I was completely spiritually broken inside. I found no purpose in what I did. The money was nice, but then there's always that fear, and I think that's kind of where what ultimately kind of, because I think I always drank a lot, right? But I don't really think I don't know if I had a drinking problem because I was always deployed. So it was like you'd go and deploy and you're dry, and I was dry. Not necessarily every Green Beret, every trip is dry, but
I've heard.
But I was dry, and then I come back and you're safe and you're partying, and then then you got to train up again, then you got to deploy again, and so there was always this cycle of sobriety where I wouldn't touch the stuff, and then I'd come back and then I'd probably overdo it. So I don't really know if I had like really a drinking problem. I probably did, but I really think I started having like the substance abuse problem was started in 2019 when I was working at Vista Equity Partners, because I had such imposter syndrome. I was afraid. I started feeling this fear, this weird thing that I hadn't felt, because, you know, going back to we were talking about when you're lieutenants and, you know, we're going to slit this guy's throat in the middle of the field because I'm afraid. I felt fear that something would happen to my guys. And it was very acute. It was very long. But then you'd come back inside the wire and that fear was gone. You felt safe.
Yeah.
And so it was very black and white to me. Like, this is time to be afraid. This is when I'm safe. You go deploy, you're downrange, you're in the bush, you're afraid. You come back behind the wire, you're less afraid. And then you go home, you're not afraid. But then I didn't have that acute like dichotomy of fear. It was just kind of this incipient, like
constant, vulnerable,
low grade kind of like fear. Like, is my boss mad at me? Is my girlfriend mad at me? Am I going to lose my job? Am I doing enough? Is my coworker like talking shit about me? Is, you know, it's like, and there's this fear that like I wasn't good enough, and I needed more things to prove that I was good enough. And then I did not like feeling afraid because that reminded me of. It didn't feel right? It didn't feel right that, like, why am I don't recognize this feeling, but I don't like it. Like, warning, like, I'm not supposed to feel this right now, right? Because the only other time I'd been afraid was, you know, downrange and I had a gun and I could do something about it. But here it's like, I can't, you know, I can't control what my boss thinks and I can't, like, And so, you know, to numb that fear, to kind of self-medicate, I started drinking a little too much, you know, and like, you know, drinking on the weekend turned into like having a glass of wine every night. And then it was like more. It was just to quiet that kind of
alarm going off.
That just feeling of fear and being afraid and then just worrying. And that fear overwhelmed me because I had no, like, I was spiritually sick. I had no spiritually grounding. I had nothing there except these material things propping me up to say that I was okay. And then, you know, the first thing that starts to go away is that relationship. And it's like, hey, Alex, like, I don't really feel like you're present. Like, because at this time, then that was like COVID. Mm-hmm. And so I was taking calls at home. And so, you know, I might as well have like a little glass of wine in my tumbler at Ford so that when she comes over, I can be nice and mellow so that we don't get into it. But then it's like, I'm not present at all. And so I think that I got some feedback, you know, that I was being very selfish. I only cared about how I felt. And what if, you know, my girlfriend at the time was like, well, what if I had a bad day and I needed you to be there for me, but you're a space cadet because either you're, so she was like, hey, you need to stop drinking. I'm like, okay, babe, I'll stop drinking. And then I just started smoking pot to the point where I was just a space cadet. And so I was not present for her at all.
Yeah.
And I was so obsessed with like how I felt and needing to like medicate myself. So I'm just right. I don't feel pain. I don't feel anxiety that she's going to be mad at me or complain or criticize me or give me feedback. I just need to not feel anything. But I wasn't present. I wasn't there. Like, if God forbid an intruder came in, like, you know, like I'd been like,
take her.
No, don't stop. Do you like Rick and Morty?
Yeah.
So that was probably like rock bottom for me, right? And you know, I was struggling because it's like, I'm like, I'm not selfish. Like I don't really think I'm a selfish person, but in my like addiction, and it just made my world so much smaller that I was only hypersensitive and focused on what I was feeling. And so, yeah, I mean, ultimately, you know, I got laid off from my job. I don't think it was performance related, but, you know, looking back, had I been more present, had I had a better attitude, had I had more gratitude for that job and asked for help, asked for feedback, you know, ingratiated myself with the bosses, like, would they have been like, you know, making layoffs, making cuts due to COVID? Would it have been like, we're going to keep this guy, we're going to cut that guy? Maybe, probably. So, you know, lose my job. And then, and then my girlfriend at the time takes a 4-month European vacation by herself. So that's probably an indicator that that she's gonna leave, right?
Slowly moving on.
And she's just like, hey, I just can't do this. I need a break from you. You're not fun. You're like not fun to be around. And I think it was a little too late. And there was other stuff. There was some conflict with my parents. So I had no relationship with my parents. I had no relationship with my partner. I had no like community of bros. You know, I had these guys that I'd go get drunk with, but they weren't really my friends. They couldn't care if I lived or died. They wouldn't be at my funeral, you know, or my wedding or anything. So I was like all alone, and basically couldn't afford to renew my lease. So I moved into this house, kind of in the lower middle class suburbs of Austin that my parents and I had as a rental property that was vacant. I moved in there, and then girlfriend out, no job, trying to find another job, and but still going to the gym. And I ran into my buddy at the gym, and this was probably very serendipitous or divine providence, who knows, but I'd met this guy as a gym bro kind of throughout my time ever since I moved back to Austin. He's one of those guys that I see at the gym, give a spot every once in a while too. Didn't really know him, knew he was a nice guy, knew he was a cool guy. Didn't really know him like personally, never hung out with him. And he's just super positive in the locker room one day, and he's like, and I remember at that time I was trying, I told, you know, my ex, I told her that I was like, I'm not going to drink anymore. And I told my parents, I'm not going to drink anymore. And so my acquaintance from the gym, he was like, hey, what are you doing? It's Friday. What are you doing this weekend? And I was like, nothing. He's like, nothing. And I was like, yeah, I quit drinking, so I really just don't do anything anymore. He's like, dude, I've been sober for like 9 years. What are you talking about? And that began a discussion. I'm like, you're sober? No, you're so cool. You're like a man about town. You're like, he's like, no, I've been sober for 9 years. Like, no, my dad's an alcoholic. Like, I was like an alcoholic. I knew really young that I wanted to nip this in the bud. And he's like started inviting me to meetings. And I was like, well, I'm not doing anything this weekend. My girlfriend left me. Like, might as well go to this meeting. And then I knew that it would, you know, kind of make my parents happy, because I promised them that I'd go to check out AA. And at first, you know, you can't get sober for anybody else. You have to do it for yourself. And luckily this guy was super patient with me and kind of eased it into me. And I worked the program. And I worked the program, and I started boxing, and that's all I had in my life. From like all of 2022. And I think those two things together, you know, I was overwhelmed, like money, job, career, girlfriend. I'm almost 40, and I'm single, and no prospect of family and kids and all these goals that I had. And it's like, it just narrowed the focus down to like just one day at a time. Like, all I have to do is not drink or do any drugs today. Just taught me to practice gratitude, taught me to they encourage you to cultivate a relationship with your higher power, right? And so as you understand them, well, you know, growing up Catholic, like, let's start there. And so I just kind of went back to all the basics, and for the first time in my life started kind of really digging into like that spiritual side. And not as something that, you know, you do, or I think for me it was, you know, being Catholic was kind of like a way I felt connected to my past and connected to like a community. And, but there's also a lot of, there's a lot of, growing up, it's kind of like, don't do that because that's a sin. Mm-hmm. And there's not like, well, don't do that because if you lie all the time, people won't trust you. You know, there's a way,
the explanation.
There's a way of teaching your kids about morality, but God bless my parents. They're great.
Yeah.
You've met them. I love my parents. I'm super grateful for them. And I don't know if it was them or just the way I received it as a kid, but for the first time I kind of really took my faith and my spirituality like seriously, personally. And I was like, I'm going to pray because I need to pray, because I don't want to drink and I need something to change. So I'll try anything. Right. And I just, like I did anything else, I like dug in, and I like went head first into it, and I did it right. Because I was desperate, because I just couldn't live that way anymore. It was like the fear, and then the substances to make me not afraid, and then ruining like relationships, because when you're messed up, you're not all there. at best, you're not present. At worst, you're, just a loose cannon, right? You're just, everything's emotional and it's just amplified. You're happy, you're super happy. You're pissed, you're super pissed, right? It's just like, you like have a drink to think you're going to calm down. It doesn't calm you down. It just makes you more volatile. So yeah, I think that was the seriously rock bottom, but like through the grace of God, like I met the guy from the gym, and he took me to meetings, and then, I went to a meeting, and it's really weird. You've never gone to any sort of like 12-step program meeting, but it's really weird. It's like all these dudes that like want to like be your friend and give you their number. And I'm just like, why are these guys being so nice to me? This is weird. Like but you understand that that's like, they want to be of service. They're like, here, take my number. If you want a drink, call me, like I want to help you on this journey. And then, boxing, it's just kind of something I never did before, never did any sort of like striking. And I think it was something outside of work and everything else that I could like go in and practice and see incremental growth. Like, I recorded myself, and like at first I was punching like Hulk, like,
Mr. Roboto.
Yeah. And then over time I like tightened things up and got a little better and look a little bit better. And it was just like, it was something, it was better than jujitsu because I could hit a bag.
Yeah.
Like jujitsu, you have to go and roll with somebody, and if you're not very good and they're good, they'll hurt you. And it's not fun to get your ass kicked like over and over again, but you have to do that to get better. Boxing, I go hit a bag and hit a bag and hit a bag every day and get better. And so I think those two things together, and then just like really leaning into this higher power, really leaning into my faith, like doing it right. And really taking it seriously more than just like, oh, I'm proud to be Catholic, right? Like, we're right. This religion's right. Everyone else is wrong. It was more like, okay, I'm going to take all that I was taught as a kid, all that I understand about my faith, and use that to have a spiritual relationship with God and rely on him to be like, hey, I don't feel right, but I don't feel okay right now. I don't feel safe right now. I feel afraid. I'm not good enough. I'm not this enough. I'm going to lose my girlfriend. And it's like, hey, whatever happens is part of his plan, and just got to trust him. And so that's kind of how I got out of that, which would I say would be rock bottom, which happened years after transition.
Yeah.
When I was like right on the top of my game, wearing like $2,000 suits into work every day. And
it's interesting where you think that you're at the pinnacle of it and you're like, this is it. And like, you just realize that you're a shell of yourself, and this really ain't it. You're actually at the very bottom. I'm not at the top of it. I'm actually in the very bottom of it. I was like at the brink of just like stepping off a ledge, and but it's like I needed to come down because all that other stuff like didn't matter. It wasn't making me happy. The fake friends, the fake important job, or the money I was earning, or this relationship with this beautiful, great woman that I couldn't connect with because I was too far up my own ass. Like none of that mattered. What matters is like, being real and being okay with yourself. Even when all that stuff goes away, you're still okay with yourself because you're going to the gym every day. You're learning how to box. You're not drinking. You're praying. You're being of service to others. That's what the AA teaches you. Kind of get out of your own head. Stop being a self-centered alcoholic or addict and start trying to help others and be of service, and just kind of cultivating these good little habits and being okay with yourself. And it's interesting. Once again, maybe it's divine intervention or the timing of everything. Is I just happened to see something on Instagram this morning, and this girl was talking about knowing that it's okay to kind of like let go of the reins, and like, all right, when she was saying that whenever I feel like, all right, I'm gonna play God, I'm in control of my life, I know what I'm doing, things never seem to work out, and like it gets fumbled and messed up. And every time that she kind of like lets go of the reins, and she's like, all right, I'm still, kind of co-captain of the ship with the guy upstairs, but whatever God and a higher, the divine intervention or higher power, whatever they kind of have in store and plan for me, I'm just going to kind of go with it. Like I'm going to give it my all. I'm not going to drink. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to do the right thing, but I'm not going to force stuff as much. She's like, I feel like it's just every time it's worked out. She's like, I can't explain it. She's like, it's fucking magic, but it's just divine. There's something there.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really comforting for a lot of people who are addicts, because you're obviously inclined. We don't know really what makes people inclined to do certain substances, and somebody could go do a bunch of heroin and then offer me heroin. I'll be like, no, but like a case of Trulies, maybe some Colombian marching powder. Like that's but different things light it for different people. And then some people can drink responsibly, have 2 or 3 beers, and be like, oh gosh, I feel good. I'm done for the day, boys. And I'm like, 2 or 3 beers, I'm just getting started.
Yeah.
But there's something happening that you're not okay. And I think there's a lot of you want things to be okay. So you think like, oh, I'm going to control this and try to control that. And you realize you have such little control over life. What you think you control is like this much, and what you really can control is like that much.
Yeah.
And it's really just yourself. And then what you can influence is even smaller. Right. But if you just kind of, trust that God has a plan for you, and God has a plan for everything. And when bad things happen, your son Peyton misses that penalty kick. Well, there's a lesson in that. I lost my job. I lost my girlfriend. I had a terrible, relationship with my mom and dad for a little bit. I was a huge dick to a lot of people. I was really sad. I was really suffering, but that all had to happen. Otherwise I would have continued to be this like shell of a spiritually sick person with no meaningful nothing in my life, just kind of hoping for more and more money or whatever so I could make the hurt like not as bad, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just kind of like everything kind of happens for a reason, and you have to trust like it's part of God's plan. And I remember the thing I think that kind of sold me on the 12-step program for me was it was really early in sobriety, and I think something happened. I think it was, I talked to my ex and she didn't want to come back to me or something. I was really spun up about. And usually I was upset and I'd press the easy button and I want to drink, but I'm not supposed to drink, right? So, I remember watching movies. So when alcoholics want to drink, they call their sponsor. So I called my sponsor, and he's like, "Hey, what's up, man?" I'm like, and he's like, "Oh, I'm walking into dinner. Can I call you back?" And I'm like, "Fine, whatever." And I was like, called one more guy from my group, and he's an older gentleman, family guy, been sober for a long time. And I called him up, and I'm like, he's like, "Hey, I got 10 minutes. What's up?" And so I started telling him about how everything's not fair, and why is this happening to me? And he very patiently listens, and I'm like, "I want a drink." And he's like, "Man, I'm sorry you're going through that. Have you prayed about it?" And I was like, "That's okay. That's not going to work." I was like, "That's not going to work." But I was like, I'm just gonna try to. I'll try it. And he hangs up. He's like, call me later. But I would just pray about it. And so I Googled. I was like, AA do not drink prayer. And the first thing that like was returned was, pray to know God's will and the strength to carry it out. And I was like, well, I know God doesn't want me to drink. So I know that. I was like, "God, I really want to drink right now, but please help me not do it." And I think that was the first and like only time I had like the desire or the craving to drink, and I didn't do it. And from that point on, like I didn't have any cravings, but I think I was like, there must be something to this prayer thing. And I think that's what sold me and like made me kind of go down the steps and like and I think that's the great thing about any sort of recovery program, because it is very personal. So you can kind of take elements of whatever you like and don't like, and as long as you adhere to like the core tenets, like you can make your program work for you. It works if you work it. So for me, that was like getting back to my roots and really diving into my Catholic faith and really, trying to use like spirituality rather than maybe like more of the compulsive like components of being religious, right? And really reading and praying and meditating and just trying to be spiritually healthy. And I think it works. I like to read about I like to read about the conquistadors and the Crusaders, and you say what you will about kind of their effects on the world, but these guys did some pretty extraordinary things. And when I was reading about them, especially like the conquistadors, because they were down in South America in the same Amazon area I was in, right? So they always really interest me. And like Pizarro or Cortez, and Francisco Orellana was one of the guys that was Pizarro's. But these guys, I thought, growing up in school, I always thought that, they brought along the priests and the friars and that was because like the king made them do it, or they had to. But no, these guys, like, they had just gotten done, in like when Columbus went, or like the early 1500s, they just got done like reclaiming that Iberian Peninsula for Christendom, like driving the Moors out. They just fought like century-long wars to like reclaim that peninsula inch by inch. These guys really believed, like they were true believers.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like they brought these priests along for show. Like, no, they wanted the priests there because they took their faith really seriously. And I think that all that to say that these guys are true believers. They took their faith seriously, and they really thought like, God's got my back. So I'm gonna, walk out to the end of the Amazon right here in what is now Brazil, and I'm going to build some boats with the tools I have on me and sail across the Atlantic back to Spain, and I'm going to make it because God's got my back. So it's like they were able to do these extraordinary things because they had faith that God had their back, that they were on this mission from God, like the Blues Brothers. but no, I mean, I think that whether God's real or not, right, that belief, that faith that God has your back, that you're able to do these extraordinary things, that's powerful.
Yeah.
I think it is.
There was something that you posted on Instagram. I think you posted it. Maybe we had talked about it, but it was
the racist meme.
No, not that one. Yeah. Way to bring it back. No, it was something about how all the apostles ended up dying like horrible deaths.
Yes.
Right. And it makes you think of like, man, like you must really know something if you're willing to get like skinned alive or stoned to death or just like crucified. We're not saying you want to be crucified upside down, right? Yeah. Like just all these kind of like horrible, gruesome deaths, and to do it with like almost a smile on your face because like the truth, or what your faith is the truth, right? Like once again, who's to say if God's real or not? Everyone has their own beliefs, but to have that, like how powerful faith can be, I was like, it really makes you think like, holy shit, like to just submit like that, right? Of like, all right, I know this is it, but I know that there's more to this, right? I know that I'm doing the right thing. It's pretty powerful to think about.
That is pretty amazing, and it makes a good case for Christianity that all not only like the 12 apostles all died horrendous, like cruel.
I think only one of them died as an old man.
Yeah,
I forget which one, but I remember watching that. Only one of them.
But there's so many early martyrs, and there is now I'm going on a kick like researching or reading about all these. All the like the Roman legionaries that were like,
what is it, like the 47 or 70? There's a certain number of them that decided that wanted to be Christian. Something about not freezing at night, or they had to walk out on the ice. I know there was something. I'll
have to read about that.
I'll have to find it for you. I'm totally effing up the story, but it was a bunch of, like a bunch of legionnaires in the Roman legion that were Christian, and they were forced to convert, and they refused to do it. And I guess, like the pagan Romans, I guess, made them walk out on the ice or made them stay out all night. And, by the miracle, whatever, they survived. That's pretty cool. Eventually they all got put to death by the sword, but it was like, a miracle that they didn't freeze at night. Because of their faith and how strong their faith was. Yeah,
there's so many stories about these early Christian martyrs that are pretty inspiring. I like reading about the soldiers because it's kind of like, these guys were high up in the Roman army, and it was it's a career killer, like us being in the military, we understand how political it is, and like how you have to kiss the knee or bend the knee, kiss the ring to like certain guys, or you don't want to like piss off this guy, or it's like, this one lieutenant colonel will get promoted and bring up all his boys. So it's like, there's a political aspect to career progression, even in the modern army. So imagine in the Roman army, you're kind of like, I'm giving it all up. Giving it all up. And then you're going to get put to death by the same, like by your unit. And then they're just like, hey man, come on, just make an offering. Just make an offering to Mars. You can say like, you have your fingers crossed. You can say like didn't mean it, just do it. And they wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I know. And they were willing to die. Right. That's it. Like that's crazy. And I know I love following your Instagram because of the spiritual piece that you put out there now. I've been wanting to ask you this. You're, I would say a devout Catholic. You're very big into Catholicism, but a lot of the stuff that you post on Instagram has looks Orthodox to me, like either Greek Orthodox or Eastern Orthodox. Do you find that to be, I guess, as interesting? Is there a reason for that? Is that just historical, like a lot of the Orthodox stuff that you're putting out there on Instagram?
Yeah, well, so there's two schisms, and I think the last schism between like the Orthodox and Catholic Church was as recent as like like 1500s, and it's over this line in the creed where Catholics say the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. And they say the Orthodox had a problem with that. They said, no, the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father, because how could you have like the Trinity? And then they have this very esoteric discussion about like the Trinity. So I, so I was born and raised Baptized, confirmed Catholic. My grandmother from the Ukraine, she was. So I don't know, like my family kind of debates this, because there are, so like in that area, there's Poles that are very, very Catholic, and then there's Ukrainians who are like Orthodox, and then along the line there's kind of lines are blurred, and there's like Ukrainian Catholics that kind of follow like the more Polish ethnicity.
The Polish Catholics owned this part of the land, and the Ukrainian Orthodox were underneath them, and then vice versa. And
so, but I mean, she definitely comes from a more like Eastern Orthodox tradition. And so, like I said, like I kind of really feel connected to like my roots through these different faiths, and then it's kind of what kind of like transcends time. But no, when I was living in LA briefly before moving to Miami, I came upon this Byzantine Rite Catholic Church. So there's apparently, and I didn't know this until recently, but apparently there's certain sections of the Eastern Orthodox Church that has basically said, I want to be like subordinate to the Bishop of Rome. So they come back in to the Catholic fold, and so their liturgy. So the liturgy in the Orthodox Church hasn't been changed for thousands of years. It's a St. John Chrysostom. And so it's really beautiful, and for me, it's very more interactive. The priest like face the altar, so he has his back towards us, and it's kind of like he's leading us in worship, and the prayers are very ancient, and like I'm a very like I love that. I love the
ceremony of it.
I love the like the pageantry of it. I love the incense. I love all that stuff, and I feel like the Western Catholic, and especially kind of Vatican II post, a lot of the Catholic, you can still find, like we know in Austin, I went to the Cathedral, St. Mary's downtown, and they have a really lovely, like very traditional mass, not traditional Latin mass, but a very traditional mass. I don't know, it just resonates with me for some reason. I think sometimes like the Western, Catholic Church has kind of watered down the liturgy, so it's very. You kind of lose something in that. And so this Eastern Rite Catholic Byzantine Church in LA, which would look very Eastern Orthodox with all the icons, and even the priest has the white beard and little hat. But it was such a beautiful ceremony. It was such a beautiful community too. Cause I moved out to LA and I didn't know anybody, and everybody there was like, hey, come to the potluck and this and that. And it was a very social like congregation. So, I mean, I think there's like a lot of beauty and a lot of like beautiful tradition. And, you know, I hope, you know, that the East, like the Orthodox and Catholic Church can kind of, you know, come together and rejoin, you know, because honestly, I think the Catholics, so the Catholic Church will let, and I don't know if your listeners know, but I don't know, but I had a priest tell me that Orthodox Christians can take communion. They because the Catholics like want to treat them all as one still. Yeah. It's the Orthodox that might have a problem with a Catholic
taking communion in their church. Yeah.
Because we're the apostates to them.
Gotcha.
But like I said, it's nothing. It's two lines. Yeah. It's called the Philoloquy. It's like two lines in the creed about whether like the Trinitarian doctrine.
Yeah. The talk going back to like early Catholic history and the soldier piece. Have you ever thought of doing I forget the name of it, but it's a trail in Spain where you launch from like the border of Spain and France and you go kind of along the northern border and you end up in some town in the northwest where the reconquest of Spain, where the Catholic kings like relaunched their and it's like kind of like the Appalachian Trail here,
right?
But it's a religious
pilgrimage
basically, and you can do it in different stints.
Isn't it called the Via Doloroso?
That could be it.
Or no, that's something else. That's where Christ walked from the cross in Spanish. No, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's a pilgrimage in Spain. Yeah.
Something, yeah. One of our friends did it.
Do we have Jamie? Jamie?
Yeah. Yeah. He just comes and knocks on the door. Yeah, it was some trail like that where, I mean, if I had my legs, I would love to do something like that to just to do it, you know, the walk in itself, but the meaningfulness to it. We had a friend who's like Spanish descent, and same thing. He wanted to do it kind of for his own reasons. And then one of our company employees, she's actually doing it, I think like this month or mid-month. And she's going to do it too.
That'd be so much fun.
But it's like you could do it in different phases. Like you can do it kind of like the easy way where, you know, you have a guide in a group and they bring your rucksack from like, you know, hotel to hotel, and then you just kind of walk like 5 to 6 miles a day.
Okay.
Or you could do it more of like the Ranger School version of like, you know, a 20K movement like every day, and you're kind of like, you know, showering every 3 days until you get to that location for like the finish line. I figured that was something that you'd be up for.
Yeah, you know, I remember learning about that years ago when I was at West Point. I think some kids did it during spring break. Very different.
Some kids went to Vegas for spring break.
Yeah,
some kids walked the Catholic Trail of Tears. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things I regret at being at West Point was like there's some kids that took some really cool vacations when they were kids, and then they signed up for like cool trips like outside, like they did exchanges to like different European military academies, and here I was going to Cancun, Student City. Yeah.
I went to Korea. I mean, that was a cool experience.
That's right, you did.
I had a wish list for CTLT, right, where you go and shadow a lieutenant.
Okay.
And I just knew, like, all right, this is going to be a big chunk of my summer. I might as well do something cool out of it. So on my wish list, it was like Italy, Alaska, Germany, you know, everywhere outside of the United States. Korea was probably like the last one, and I ended up getting Korea. But I had a blast in it. I mean, in Korea, it was cool.
I did Campbell. Okay. Did CTLT at Campbell.
Sounds miserable.
They had just gotten back from an Afghanistan deployment, and it was one of those things where like the unit was kind of decimated because people were like going PCSing to do, you know, after the post deployment, and so I think they had like a E6 platoon sergeant and then like E5 squad leaders, and they just came in and did PT and like sat around the office and yeah, I think I went out to Nashville a couple weekends. That was my CTLT experience.
Well, dude, I think this is a good place to stop. I appreciate you coming in and sharing your story. We've been friends since, we knew each other. We were acquaintances at West Point, but we were really friends since like 2005, 2006, right?
No shit.
Till, I guess
like 20 years.
Almost 20 years. And I think I told you this before. I don't know if you remember me saying this, but you sober now is the best version of you that I can remember since we were like kids, So I'm so happy for where you're at now with, your sobriety, just where you are in life, your faith. And I'm also happy that you're like a neighbor now, just, technically like an hour away, but with the traffic down to Miami from Boca, it's like 2.5. So we don't get to see each other that much, but I'm glad that you're only just a phone call away.
Yeah, me too.
So Alex, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure, Ben.
Awesome.
Good to see you, buddy.